Okay, Beth, let's talk about these local elections. We're starting to see the commercials for Buddy Dyer. We're seeing the billboards up for Paul Paulson. And, you know, it used to be that when these people ran for office, you didn't know what party they were from. That's not the case anymore. You guys have somebody in to talk about this. Is that right?
We do. I've got with me here Steve Lemongello. He's writing a story that will be online later today. And you know, it's a really interesting issue because technically these local races are supposed to be nonpartisan, right? They're supposed to, you know, they say potholes don't have a party affiliation. And so when you're talking about local government, it's supposed to be, you know, down the middle. Yeah. But that is not the case, and I think we've seen that repeatedly in these local races.
I mean, like, voters say that they like nonpartisan races, they say they like nonpartisan elections, but of course, you know, partisan executive committees and partisan groups are always involved in these races. A lot of times, you know, Paul Paulson, running in Orlando, sort of overtly said he was Republican, which of course he's not supposed to do according to state laws. Right. But even in places like Winter Park this year, like the Orange County Republican Committee got heavily involved in that race, sent out flyers against the opponent of Mayor Steve Leary, Cynthia McKinnon, because, you know, McKinnon saying how McKinnon had backed Obama in the past and things like that. That's right.
And, you know, that Winter Park race ended up being, you know, one of the dirtiest we had seen, and partisan politics had a lot to do with it. Yes. The Republican Party became very heavily involved in that race. They were sending out mailers. They were comparing the opponent to Obama, and there was quite a bit of racial undertones going on there. And then again, in this race coming up in the city of Orlando, you know, again with Paulson and Dyer, same thing. You know, I think the thing is, the races are supposed to be nonpartisan, but if you look at it practically, everybody knows who wants to know what the party affiliations are.
Yes, and the Democratic chair and a few other people, a few other experts have said, like, partisan affiliation is probably the best way of people figuring out what people stand for. And a lot of people who are uneducated about local races, they see a bunch of names, they have no idea, but they see an R or a D next to it. They have some idea of what they stand for. On the other hand, the Republican chair will tell you that it was the Democrats themselves who started this back in the early 90s, back when it was mostly Republican registrations. Now things have switched. And I think, as the Republican chair, Lou Oliver, said, you know, the chickens have come home to roost. And as Oliver also said, you know, they don't get involved in every race. What they do is, their number one goal is, can they win? Which is why they got involved in Winter Park and not so much in Orlando.
Yeah, you know, and you can kind of see both sides of it. On one hand, I think more information, including party affiliation, is good for voters. Voters should be as educated as possible about who they might vote for. But unfortunately, you do have races where people vote straight D's, straight R's, and depending on which way the county is leaning, Orange County now heavily Democratic, and more nonpartisan affiliations here in terms of registration.
And yet there's a Republican-controlled commission, which is the opposite of the way it was back in the 90s. So essentially, you know, what had started as a Democratic initiative for nonpartisan races sort of, you know, turned against them.
So yeah, Amy. So there will be more on this, I am sure. This is very controversial. There's been efforts on and off to make the races partisan rather than nonpartisan. So.
It is fascinating, for sure, and we appreciate that report. Thanks, you guys. We're going to get you a quick check on the weather, because the last time I looked outside, Molly, it was rainy.